Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 71st episode of the PP Political Podcast. I'm Eshan Pokhrel.
I'm Michael Bodeker.
Today, we're doing a quick episode here, just recapping the report found released over the week, I think on Wednesday, I believe, by the Special Counsel in President Biden's classified documents case. He was cleared of all charges, in a sense, but what's interesting is why exactly he was cleared of all charges, and that's just we wanted to talk about the verdict, or not the verdict, but the report itself and the response from the president. So before we get into the actual content, as an overview, Bodeker, I didn't even really know there was all this happening. I heard about it, but I just kind of forgotten, and this report came out of nowhere for me. What about you?
I think this is one of those things like we talked about when it happened. We were like, oh, this is interesting, because obviously both President Biden and President Trump have their own classified stuff going on. I think it's a little bit more severe with President Trump. There's all of the arguments that it's deep state or whatever it may be. Both of them have mishandled classified information. Both of them definitely did it, and I think in ways that, like, if you or I had a clearance or something like that, that definitely would have been way worse for us than it would be for them.
Absolutely.
And then it's kind of in reminiscent of like the Hillary emails stuff from 2016. That was a huge controversy, especially within like the defense community, just because I remember it was a huge deal. Like us being from Huntsville, like people in Huntsville were really mad about that because a lot of people in Huntsville have clearances, and if they had done some of the similar things that we would have never seen them again. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably an echoed sentiment now. As time has gone on, we're 8 years removed from that scandal. I think this came out, and we talked. I remember talking to you about it, and then it just kind of, they did their thing, and there really wasn't any leaks or anything, crazy coming out from that. And so then, when Robert Hur releases the report, we're all combing through it, and we're seeing, the clips of some important stuff from CNN or Fox or whoever it may be. And then you texted me, like, Biden's about to speak. What is he going to speak about? And, we're like, oh, what is he going to talk about? And then he obviously, comes in guns blazing at this report. And we're obviously going to get into his response, but
yeah,
it's just a really interesting saga.
Yeah, exactly. Like, for context, President Biden, they announced that President Biden was going to address the nation like 15 minutes before he did. They announced it. I believe it was like 7:45 p.m.
It's just
Central.
super rare for him.
It's super rare for President Biden. I think he's done the least interviews of any president, one-on-one interviews, least press, like from like question taking from the press spot, like press podium, anything like that. President Biden's been the least accessible president in a long time, which is a little concerning, I would say. But the reason he spoke was directly, one, obviously to, I guess, celebrate, you could say, the outcome of Robert Hur's report, but not hidden in the report, the part of the report that really went viral, and not even just viral, has really caught the attention of millions of Americans, especially online, but I'm assuming this is something that's definitely reverberating around the country in the real world, is this excerpt that I'm going to read right now. So, in his interview with Our Office, Mr. Biden's memory was worse. He did not remember when he was vice president, forgetting on the first day of the interview when his term ended. Quote, "If it was 2013, when did I stop being vice president?" And forgetting on the second day of the interview when his term began. Another quote, "In 2009, am I still vice president?" He did not remember, even within several years, when his son Beau died. And apparently his memory also appeared hazy when describing Afghanistan and the fallout and decision around pulling out of Afghanistan early in his term. So that's the excerpt that's brought the most scrutiny, and I think that's the reason that President Biden really took a national address to like talk about what happened. I think national addresses typically are like they're big because like the networks have to air them, right? Like they're like I think that's something like that. They're very influential. You get the most eyeballs possible. And yeah, I mean, he went up to this podium and They announced it pretty. I only got to see it because I was happened to be scrolling on Twitter or on X, I guess, keep forgetting, and formerly Twitter. You're right. And I saw some account said President Biden to address the nation at whatever time, and it was like in the next 15 minutes. So I texted you and I was like, oh hey, Biden's addressing the nation, and there was no explanation for what it was. I would assume it would have been because of the report, but I was a little confused as to what the actual statement would be. So he came out in the presser. Let me see if I can find a clip of it. He came out in the presser, talked about Special Counsel report. Nothing crazy, I would say, but like he was trying to basically set the record straight that he was remembering. He was able to remember. He didn't have a poor memory. One of the quotes, the biggest, he came out firing, like I'm saying, like you said, one of the biggest quotes. He came out very emotional about the part, especially about the part where he said he didn't remember his son Bo dying. I don't know if he actually said a date. I don't know. I think he said that I don't need anybody to remind me when he passed away. And he talked about how they do a service every Memorial Day. No years were mentioned. He also said my memory's fine, quote unquote, to a reporter. He really got into it in the press conference. I don't know if you saw any highlights or anything, but it was kind of like seeing how Biden was on the campaign trail, I would say. And even when he was vice president, kind of just like snapping back at reporters with a little bit of fiery attitude, which was a good start to the press conference, but then it got much worse because he had one of his gaffes in the conference itself, and you can take us through that, I guess.
It's really difficult to prove to people that you have a good memory when you make mental gaffes during your defense of your memory. I feel like that's, anytime you're defending yourself from something and you make the very mistake that people are accusing you of, it's just not a good look. I don't think there has to be too much explanation of that. He's defending his memory. He's fighting back against the report. He misspoke, called President Sisi of Egypt the president of Mexico. He was talking about opening the gate, but you're kind of wondering where he's kind of going on about. But yeah, that was a strange moment that I think really undercuts his claims of he's all there. And I think we've talked about it too. There have been multiple instances of this happening in the last couple of weeks. Like you referred to him talking to Helmut Kohl, the former chancellor of Germany, in 2021. Well, Kohl passed away in 2017. He was dead for multiple years. And then he talked about President Mitterrand from France. He was president of France from 1981 to 1995 and died in 1996. I mean, he has not been alive for almost 30 years at this point.
Yeah, and that was those are both within the last week, I believe. It's been very. So,
and then confusing Sisi and President Obrador from Mexico. Those gentlemen are not. They
are not the same.
They are not the same gentlemen. So it's really strange.
It's not a good position to be in. I think. At all. Absolutely.
I get it if it's once, right? I get. Presidents are going to gaffe. I mean, we remember some of President Trump's gaffes, like Kofifi, Thailand, stuff like that. Every president, every candidate. Us, we've done that too.
Absolutely, yeah.
There was one of the episodes of the PB Political Podcast. I remember you could not get somebody's name right. I forget who it was.
I remember that. I can't remember the exact name, but that did happen. Yeah, but yeah.
It's everybody does it, but his are so concentrated and focused that it is just so.
It's also it's not even the gaffe in the sense that it's misremembering. Mitterrand and Macron are very different people. Mitterrand was president of France 30 years ago. It's I don't know what. I get mixing up names, but I mean even the time horizon, Kohl and even Merkel before Schultz, there's time horizons that I don't know what.
Himself was chancellor of Germany for a long time.
That's what I'm saying. Since the 2000s, I don't really know where. I'm just confused as to where I don't even know if you can call him gaffes in this, because like I don't think he's not saying the wrong name, from what I mean from my understanding. Like at that point, you're saying you're remembering everything. I could be wrong. I'm not a doctor, for the record. I'm nowhere near being a doctor. I never will be. But it's very different. Yeah, and let me say, Biden did open. He opened the. It was a little interesting. I might just be I just might have not seen it before. But I felt like this one, he came out swinging on kind of a general election type message. He came out saying his document. He explained he addressed his case, and then he said it's much better than the one of Mr. Trump's, which it is, admittedly. But it was kind of odd to see that off the bat. But then he also kind of played into it was weird. He kind of played into the whole age thing, saying, I've been a senator for 40 or whatever. I've been in Washington for 40 years or something. It was a weird thing to like say, considering how he mixed up Mitterrand and then like Cole, and like it's like those people are from a different era of geopolitics, and he comes in talking about his 40 years. I just feel like, I'm not saying the Democrat, like the White House and like the DNC is kind of like setting him up, because that's a little conspiratorial, but there was definitely a sense of that in that address. Like that address should not have happened, considering the last couple of weeks and the last couple of months, even maybe last years of the Biden presidency. You barely see an address. It's fine to address something, but I mean, I don't know. It was bad. I just don't see how. He had good moments. He did have good moments. He had quips.
Yeah.
There was one where he kind of like, he hit back a reporter. He was like, they were like, is your memory doing worse or whatever? And they were like, he said, my memory is so bad I let you speak, which is kind of funny. That was funny. But then it's just like, I mean, that was absolutely the best one. But then like, I don't know. I just don't see how. I mean, like a majority of the Democratic Party in many, many polls are showing that people don't want President Biden to run within the party. What is he at? He's at Jimmy Carter levels of approval, 37%, right? That's that's the lowest since Carter, which was the 80s. And I mean, like, I just don't see. I don't know. I really don't understand why he got in front of the nation, especially considering the general election has really begun at this point. I don't know.
I mean, and even getting into some of the report, like this sentence from her really stuck out, and I think Biden addressed it too in his response. He said, "We've also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's shocking that that's just like where we're at now.
They're basically claiming that, like in another excerpt, like they're basically claiming that his mental state was so bad that they can't actually pin him for willfully retaining them, because they basically make the case that his mental faculties are so poor that he's not willfully doing it. He just doesn't know, which is almost worse than charging him.
Yeah, it's odd. That's what I'm saying. Like, and it's always fun when we have something like this come up, and then you have like with Trump. Post January 6th, the most fun part about that was like you got to see the spike in 25th Amendment on Google. Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky, I think he posted like a time chart of like 25th Amendment usage throughout February 8th, and that was just kind of funny to look at. I think the searches went up around the release of the report, and then into the press conference you can see a spike. And I mean, the fact that that's where we've gotten to, and just like casually talking about invoking the 25th, which has only been done for like procedures. Like I believe George Bush did it when he had a colonoscopy or something, when Dick Cheney was acting president. But like the fact that it's something that's been seriously floated by, I mean, members of Congress, like Republican members of Congress are going to say 25th. That doesn't really mean as much anymore. I think they're going to obviously say invoke the 25th or whatever. But like there's a lot of questions coming in the Democrat. They're not getting to that level yet, but a lot of like prominent Democratic strategists, like David Axelrod comes to mind, obviously a big player in the Obama years. I mean, he's questioning the president. I mean, like, obviously you have a primary challenge, not too much of a struggle for President Trump, considering how Dean Phillips, the congressman from Minnesota, hasn't really been able to make much headway, but in the United Party, that's not happening. Trump had challengers, but Trump's challengers probably did less. I think they got less delegates than, Bill Weld got one delegate in 2020. And yeah, so shout out to Bill Weld. But yeah, it's just crazy. I don't really know how it's wild.
Hur was also careful to make the difference of how Biden's case was different than Trump's. To Biden's credit, or I guess maybe even his staff's credit, he returned, the documents and cooperated with the investigation. And Hur kind of argues that the opposite is true with Trump, that, he refuses to return the documents and basically tried to cover it up. Whatever you think of that. But there are definitely obviously different parallels between these two reports. And I think both of them are kind of damning in different ways. Trump's probably more negligence and Biden's incompetence. That's kind of the duality of man in this scenario. It's either negligence, and refusal, insubordination, I guess you could even call it, versus just pure incompetence and a lack of mental faculty.
Yeah.
That is a tough. It's bad for both of them.
It's bad. Honestly. It's bad, and I think it's only getting worse. And we can get into a little bit of the general election now, because we've seen these first early primaries does not look like, unless there's something black swan event that happens, God forbid, then we're gonna be looking at a second Trump Biden election matchup. The only difference this time is that I think, having a credible third party candidate, RFK Jr., who's actually in 6 states now, apparently representing the We the People party, because it's easier to get ballot access in 6 states around the country. So shout out to them, I guess, for that. It's actually kind of a creative way to get around it. I think Ross Perot did the same thing in his day. Maybe I think he did it one or two in a couple states, but regardless, I just don't see. I actually think that there's no way this doesn't hurt Biden, in the sense that Biden doesn't have that same enthusiasm Trump has around him as a person, as a personality, and as he doesn't have the aura that Trump brings. And I don't think there's 30% of the country that's committed to President Biden the way they are to President Trump. No matter what, 30% of the country is going to show up for President Trump, at least. And yeah, I just don't. I think Biden's looking at, as of right now, one of the worst general elections. As of now, again, we're going to come into, I don't have a timeline. I know Breaking Points did a really nice flow chart of how the trials are going to shake out. It was very concise, very easy to see. A lot of the ones I've seen online have been very messy. We don't really know how the trials are going to shake out on President Trump's legal standing. I don't think it's going to matter. It doesn't look like they're going to remove him from the ballot on 14th Amendment grounds, which I think is the right call, considering he hasn't been prosecuted. The Supreme Court did hear arguments on that on Thursday or Friday.
Well, it looks like, and I, maybe not straying too far, but I guess we can kind of talk a little bit about it too. That you and I are both kind of talking about the court looks. I think honestly, there's a shot that this is an 8-1 or a 9-0 ruling.
Yeah, it looks like there's just not enough mustard on the side of the plaintiff. There's and I think Trump benefits from not having. There's obviously been no usage of the 14th Amendment since the Civil War, or Section 3 of the 14th Amendment since the Civil War, and I think
particularly by states. Congress I think did it a couple of times to bar ex Confederates from getting into Congress.
Yeah,
but we've never seen a state disqualify a federal
candidate. And I think it makes sense. The argument, one of the biggest arguments that I personally thought made sense for the case was when Trump's team, I don't know if it was Trump's team, but it was brought up that obviously the 14th Amendment, the way I look at the 14th Amendment, I think you talked about this too when you were texting me about this, your epiphany. Do you want to walk through your epiphany? You can go through it actually.
I guess I need to go through it, and I just was reading through it online, but the Section 5. So when you're talking about constitutional law, the first basically 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is basically what Congress both has the power to do and what Congress is explicitly prohibited from. So when you look at the First Amendment, right? It's Congress shall make no law abridging whatever. And then as you get to Reconstruction, I think the 13th Amendment is the first one that says Congress shall have the power to enforce this by appropriate legislation if necessary. So that's the abolition of slavery. So Congress, it actually gives the federal government, and Congress specifically, the power to do something like to enforce the legislation. 13th Amendment does that. The 14th Amendment, Section 5, has that Congress have the power to enforce the provisions of the 14th Amendment. So that that's incorporating the insurrection clause and all of that into Congress shall have the power to enforce that, which I guess in my interpretation would mean that amendment is geared towards Congress having the power to remove people from ballots. So theoretically, that would mean to me that like Congress would have the power to remove Trump from the ballot by means of the 14th Amendment. Obviously, I don't think that would happen. It's a Republican House. I assume that all of them would say no, and I assume that I don't know if all the Democrats would say yes to remove him. I think you could probably swing 15 or 20 Democrats in rural areas.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
At least,
yeah.
I think that vote would probably be something like 250 to 180, something in that range.
Yeah, which isn't enough. So. Yeah,
and then in the Senate, you would say it even passes the House. I assume you would be able to filibuster that, which means, and I assume that obviously you're probably going to have all the Republican senators filibustering that. So
yeah,
you're not going to be able to jam it through.
Yeah, I mean maybe not like Murkowski, but not enough. I mean like most of the senator, Murkowski, Collins, you could see maybe breaking, but regardless, yeah. I mean.
And then you and I kind of got into the historical context a little bit where it would have made no sense after the 14th Amendment was passed to give states the power to remove like federal candidates from the ballot, because that was kind of the whole point of the Civil War. Like if you gave basically Tennessee the power to remove Rutherford B. Hayes from the ballot, that's kind of antithetical to the whole point of what we just fought for, basically the nullification of basically the South and former slaveholding areas, the insurrectionist areas, to have the power to remove federal candidates just because they don't like them.
Exactly, and I mean that's like looking at the 1864, not necessarily, but like kind of the same, and that's the logic that I think it's going to be almost impossible for Anderson, who brought the case against the Trump team, to beat, is like if you have I agree, the whole point of this the Civil War amendments were to basically disallow bad faith states and bad faith actors in those states to disenfranchise people in one way or another. Voting rights, property, everything. And that's the whole point. Citizenship, that's the whole point of the Civil War amendments. And I've kind of come around on this because I thought there was a case for Trump to be prosecuted on the 14th Amendment, but looking at like the way it's been presented, the way they argued it, absolutely not. Because I think if Congress chooses to enact it, whether it be like I don't know if it'd be each member or if it would be like I don't know if it would be each member, if it would be like Congress, each state, like the way they do the contingent election, like each state votes, and then there'd be 2/3 of that. Whatever it is, I think that's the proper way to do it, and that's the language that makes sense, looking at the pivot from 12 to 13, and so forth. So yeah, on the amendments. So yeah, I mean, I think it looked like even like Justice, I guess you would say the most quote-unquote liberal justice is Justice Jackson. I don't even know if that's fair, though, but Justice Jackson was giving a hard time to the Anderson side, the plaintiffs, just because like it was a good point. I mean, no one could really reconcile. Then there was no real good response to why one state should have the power to decide how all 50, or two states, I guess, should have the power to decide all 50, the ballots for all 50. So I think it's a fair argument. I don't think Trump's going to be. And
I think you could even put this shoe on the other foot too. Like our state of Alabama, say Steve Marshall decides that because of the classified documents case that.
Yeah, so Ken Paxton, the AG of Texas, has actually floated. He said this a couple times. Obviously, the border crisis is a really, if it affects anybody, the most it's affecting Texas, obviously. He was like, maybe we won't put Biden on the ballot because of how he's handled the border crisis, which, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, this is going to be a deciding, you can't do that, obviously. In this language, you can't do it. So,
of course, absolutely not.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's the can of worms you're opening, and, like, that's actually a good point, like, to put it on the other side, like, It's a really good point.
And it's different context, I guess, because they're trying to pin him to insurrection and like January 6th, and
But the logic of like the base logic of not being able to decide the eligibility of one state is like stays the same, I would say, regardless. But
I think it should be a fundamental tenet of our society that states removing federal candidates from the ballot is just not a good idea.
I fully agree. So so going into November, it looks like we're gonna have Trump, we're gonna have Biden, we're gonna have RFK. I think those are the big three candidates. I think I'm interested to see this independent candidate, RFK Jr. Obviously, we talk about him a lot just because he's like kind of a fascinating candidate to potentially. I mean, I'm not gonna say win, but like the conditions are very favorable for a third party to do well, and with somebody that's as popular and has as much traction, who knows? Just because like looking at obviously his polling high. The other thing is, again, like I was saying, the soft support for President Biden seems to be eroding. I mean, obviously, his handling of Israel-Palestine is actually, I think it's underwater now among Democrats, which is actually like a big departure from the beginning of it, obviously. But it's underwater. The economy, people, even though economic metrics are doing better, people just don't feel good about the economy. And maybe it is all vibes. People don't feel good about the economy still, and they don't think Trump or Biden's done anything to help it. They see, I don't even know how much you can attribute to this, but you can just see dysfunction in Congress, which isn't even necessarily on the Democrats. I mean, there's a much better case for that being on the Republicans right now, considering the mess the House is in. But even with that, I mean, that's still going to be kind of pinned on the president. So it's a very unfavorable climate for Biden, and I'm very interested to see how we go into these debates. It looks like they're going to debate. It looks like Biden and Trump are both looking to debate, and if they debate, that means Kennedy's going to be there too. We'll see if that actually brings something interesting.
It would be good to have him there.
I think so. I think he's polling above the metrics and 15%, and also I think it'd be fascinating to see.
Yeah.
And and I bring this up mainly just because I think this would be kind of interesting. Apparently, the RFK campaign is going to name a vice president within the next month. So that'll be one of the earliest nominees for a major candidate in history. Picking a vice president. There's one report, Vanity Fair reports Andrew Yang was floated. I don't think that would be. I don't think he said. The quote is. This is by Best Levin. I don't know. Andrew Yang probably won't accept RFK Jr.'s VP offer report. I don't know if this is offered. This is a one article, no corroboration. Puck News apparently broke the story. I don't know how that would go about. I think it would kind of make sense if the Kennedy argument is the Biden support's so soft that we could actually peel a decent amount of Biden voters off. And I think they could. And I think having Yang there could work. I don't know. I don't think it'll work enough. I think he still needs to have someone Washington that has like some kind of governmental experience. I don't know what you think about that, but I think that's like the best way to go.
Yeah, I would. Well, and I'm also looking at like the polling just in general. Like, as of this day, 2020, Biden was up 5.6, and now I think Trump's up like 1.5, 1.8. So that's basically an 8-point shift, 7 or 8 point shift in 4 years, which is fascinating. And then I've got the 2024 the three-way polling up right now: Trump, Biden, and Kennedy. And of the 4 polls of this that have been released within the last basically 3 months, Trump is winning big in 4 of them, and Biden narrowly wins, at least in the popular vote. We don't know how it would shake out state by state. But Trump +5 in the RCP average in a 3-way race. And that's super interesting. Because Kennedy really could end up playing spoiler to Biden's, and it depends on how how Trump's court cases end up playing out and how Biden's just general competency ends up playing out. I mean, I guess, for Biden, it ends up getting worse day by day. I think, when people are genuinely like resigned to the fact that you're not there mentally, I mean, that is an awful spot to be in. And, neither of us were alive, but President Reagan, like back in 1984, had some of these same issues. And obviously we know that at least towards the end of his term, maybe the last year or two, Reagan was facing, some mental decline. And obviously he gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's, post-administration, ends up living until 2004. So he ended up living 15 years after his term was over. If President Biden lives 15 years after his term is over, I will go ahead and run for office. I mean that is, I don't see it. Reagan was able to effectively defeat those claims. There's the debate that we talked about in our 1984, in our Reagan episode with Walter Mondale, I won't be intimidated by the youth and inexperience of my opponent.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
That Reagan was able to spin that off, and I don't think Biden has that.
Yeah, and the other thing is Reagan also kind of, I guess, benefited in the sense that he was also, the main concerns came in his second term, right? And that really allowed George H.W. Bush to, really carry the mantle forward, and he destroyed Michael Dukakis, over 400 electoral votes. I think Bush was just able to attack Dukakis, really well, and he was able to get the best parts of the Reagan administration for voters and just repackage it. It's kind of like if President Trump, President Trump had a decent amount of time where he was over 50% in approval, which is pretty high for today. If President Trump wasn't as incendiary and he had his second term, he's his second term right now, and he's carrying it on to his VP or whatever, I think you could see something similar, but obviously that's not where we're living in. But yeah, I think Biden definitely, I don't really see the path for Biden. I think Biden's path is definitely hinging on right now, is Trump going to get convicted of anything in time before the election? That's the only, because it looks like they're not even trying to get anything done. They were kind of floating, they're looking at maybe legalizing or rescheduling the class of marijuana, which I don't think is going to win him the election, but I think it'll definitely win him points among the average younger voters, maybe the average American voter. It's okay, cool. Cool, I guess you did something, but that's something that he could have done years ago, at this time point years ago. So I'm really a little confused about the strategy, if we can say there's a strategy. But yeah.
Biden's path. The worst part is that Biden's path forward is basically Trump's demise.
That's the only path. I think that's the only path forward, and I agree. I don't think there's no strategy. There's no campaign strategy. He picked up the UAW endorsement. I believe President Trump picked up the Teamsters endorsement. I don't know if they endorsed him or if they. He definitely visited the Teamsters. But even that's fascinating.
The thing is that I think Biden will be endorsed by the majority of unions, but I think that Trump actually will be pretty close in terms of the actual union vote.
Yeah,
I would say the actual higher ups in the union are going to break for Biden heavily.
Yeah.
But I think that actually blue collar union workers, I think will actually end up breaking for Trump. Majorly.
That's the fascinating thing. If you look at and union voters aren't necessarily a huge, they're a pretty big portion of the electorate, relatively, but the thing is they're big in very key states. Rust Belt, huge. But they were split on Democrat. I think it was 2016 Trump Clinton. They were very split, and that's just because Trump spoke the cultural aspect of Trump. The campaign he ran really spoke to, I guess, a lot of voters in the Rust Belt. But the economic policy, and obviously Hillary Clinton wasn't any savior of unions or anything. That's not good. Hillary Clinton was probably worse on unions than President Trump. President Biden has been good on unions, I guess we could say. Definitely has been good for unions, but Teamsters did meet with Trump. I think we'll see. We'll see. I guess it's going to be fascinating. I don't think they have a plan, they being the Biden campaign. That's not, we hope Trump gets convicted. And then I just saw the DNC is actually filing a complaint against the RFK Jr. campaign, alleging that the super PAC is colluding with the campaign on ballot access. I don't know if that's true. Obviously, it seems but the crazy thing is that in most elections, that's not even something they talk about. So I think the DNC is definitely getting a little worried.
And then maybe we see a dark horse. There's still some time.
Well, the primaries don't matter is the crazy thing. Really, if you think about it, unfortunately, the primaries don't necessarily matter. You can go to the convention and just have I don't know, Gavin Newsom or something step in. You can have Biden drop out. delegates
we've
are
covered
unbound.
elections before where, people have done well in primaries and then the convention happens and they can't decide after 17 ballots.
Yep.
So they're like, okay, let's go with this guy instead.
They're going to draft Gavin Newsom or something. That's possible. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. It would be crazy drama. I'd be surprised in the sense that it seems a little too wild, but it could be possible.
Yeah, and I think we've talked before, too, about, not the stability of, modern society, but when we cover old elections and stuff, they're so unpredictable and unstable, basically, and kind of a mark of those times. I think a lot of the political climate right now is a reflection of, basically, everyone's kind of scared to, actually do, history-making stuff.
Absolutely.
Because of the times we live in. So I think that, while I can see that happening, people are so scared to press the red button in terms of any aspect of the way life is right now, in a way that is very dissimilar to a lot of other times in American history.
I agree. I think
it's like the post-Cold War mindset, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I would actually. It depends, but I feel like we're looking at the beginning of a full seventh party system in the U.S. But it's not necessarily electorally. It's definitely more of a split, not on the states, but definitely in a demographic split. And that's something that's fascinating. I think Trump really expedited that, but this election could be something crazy, and we're excited to get into it. We just wanted to cover this Biden speech.
Scandals, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. We just wanted to get on and cover this Biden speech. We should be having a fun episode midweek. I believe we're still doing it. We should be with candidate in Alabama's 2nd Congressional District, the new district that was redrawn after the Supreme Court determined that it violated the rights of minorities, especially Black Americans, in the state of Alabama. Should be having a candidate on for that. Very excited for that. On Tuesday, so that'll be out Wednesday. But for now, go to pppolitical.com. We continue dropping election news. I think we just released a South Carolina recap for the Democratic side. We'll be having a Nevada and U.S. Virgin Islands recap coming out soon. And tell all your friends, if you guys want electoral news, we're doing it nonpartisanly and without trying to make you go to war with your family. And that's what it's all about, right? So, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you all for listening. I'm Eshan Pokhrel.
And I'm Michael Bodeker.
And goodbye.